Nobody noticed the dragon at first. That was unusual. Rilo was not a small thing in the way furniture is small. He was the size of a large dog, with golden-green scales that caught the light like old coins and a pair of short wings folded tight against his back. He had amber eyes that moved carefully around a room before the rest of him did. He was, in every way, the kind of creature that should have drawn attention. But Outpost Caloran was a busy place. Ships came and went through its docking arms every few hours. Traders argued over cargo fees in 4 languages at once. The ventilation system had been broken for 6 weeks and made a sound like someone dragging a chair across a metal floor. Nobody had time to look twice at a small golden-green dragon curled up in the corner of Cargo Bay 3. Ensign Wren Tallies noticed him on her 3rd day. She had been assigned to Caloran fresh out of her transit posting, young enough that her crew ID still had the laminate smell on it. She was cataloging incoming freight when she saw him, tucked between 2 large shipping containers, head resting on his forelegs, watching her with those amber eyes. What stopped her was not the dragon. It was what was beneath him. An old jacket, human-made clearly, the kind issued to Longfield survey crews, heavy canvas, reinforced elbows, pockets that sealed with magnetic tabs. It was worn to the point of being almost colorless in places, the cuffs fraying, one shoulder seam repaired with a different thread. Rilo was not simply lying near it. He was lying on it, around it, with the careful deliberateness of someone protecting a thing that could not protect itself. Wren watched him for a moment. He watched her back. She went back to her freight manifest and said nothing. That evening she asked Dockmaster Fenn about the dragon. Fenn was a wide, unhurried man who had worked Caloran's cargo bay for 11 years and was not easily moved by anything. Been here about 3 months, Fenn said, without looking up from his terminal. Came off the Ardent Star when it docked. Crew didn't say much about him. Director Falk wanted him moved on, but the Dravath Trade Council sent a message asking us to accommodate him, so here we are. Does he talk? He can, chooses not to mostly. Fenn paused. He understands everything you say, though. Don't make the mistake of thinking he doesn't. What's the jacket? Fenn was quiet for a moment. Belonged to someone on the Ardent Star. That's all I know, I don't ask. Wren went back to her bunk and looked up the Dravath species on the station database. It was a short entry, small interstellar civilization. Scaled, winged, fire-capable. Near-extinction event approximately 40 years ago. Cause listed as geological catastrophe on their home system. Surviving population, low thousands. Culture, pride-based, deeply communal, with strong ritual traditions around objects and memory. The entry did not explain the jacket. The next morning she passed through Cargo Bay 3 again. Rilo was in the same corner. The jacket was spread more fully beneath him now, like he had arranged it while she slept. One of the dockworkers walked past him with a loader, and he tracked the machine with his eyes, but did not move. Wren crouched a few meters away, not close enough to crowd him, just close enough to be in his line of sight. I'm not going to bother you, she said. Rilo looked at her. His eyes were very still. I just work here, she added. Freight, very boring. He said nothing, but he didn't look away either, which Fenn later told her was more than most people got. She stood up and walked on. It became a small routine over the following days. She would pass through, crouch for a moment, say something low and unimportant, and leave. He never spoke. He never moved toward her, but something in the quality of his silence began to change. The first few times it had felt like a wall. After a week, it felt more like a closed door, still shut, but with the possibility of a handle somewhere. On the 8th day, she crouched as usual and noticed, for the first time, a name stenciled on the inside collar of the jacket. The fabric was creased and the letters were faded, but close up, in the cargo bay's flat light, she could just make them out. D.R.L. Ardent Star. She looked at Rilo. He was looking at the jacket, not at her. His jaw was pressed gently against the worn canvas near the collar, over that name, the way you might rest your head on something you were afraid of forgetting. Wren stood up slowly and left him alone. That night, she put the name into the station's crew registry. Davy Orell, xenobiologist, survey and field medic, last posting the Ardent Star. Status deceased. She sat with that for a while, then she went to find the Ardent Star's captain. Captain Lena Sorn did not want to talk about Davi Orel. That was clear from the moment Wren found her in the Ardent Star's docking corridor, running through maintenance checks with the focused energy of someone keeping themselves busy on purpose. Sorn was a lean woman in her mid-40s with close-cropped hair and the particular kind of stillness that people develop when they have learned to be calm in emergencies. She looked at Wren's crew ID, then at Wren's face, and something in her expression closed slightly. "Kaloran staff," she said. "Ensign tallies, freight assignment." Wren kept her voice even. "I've been sharing a cargo bay with your dragon for 10 days. Sorn looked at her for a moment, then she set down her maintenance pad and leaned against the corridor wall. "He's not my dragon, he was Davi's." "That's what I wanted to ask you about." Sorn was quiet. Outside, through the docking port, a supply shuttle was maneuvering in with the slow mechanical care of something very large trying to be gentle. They both watched it without watching it. "He was a good man," Sorn said finally. "That's not a useful answer, I know, but it's the one I have right now." Wren waited. She had learned early that some people needed the silence to decide whether to keep going. Sorn decided to keep going. 18 months ago, she said, the Ardent Star had been surveying Verath 6, a partially terraformed planet that showed signs of a dead civilization. Nobody had been there in a long time. The ruins were old and unstable, but full of data cores that the research division wanted recovered. Standard field assignment. The kind the Ardent Star had run dozens of times. They found Rilo on the second day. He was alone in the lower ruins, injured, one wing membrane torn, 3 scales cracked along his left side, and had clearly been there for some time. His scouting party was gone. The geological event that had killed them had also buried half the access tunnels, and Rilo had not been able to fly out. He had been surviving on whatever water collected in the old stonework and whatever small creatures lived in the dark. He was not in a good state, Sorn said. Not just physically, he had lost everyone he came with. You have to understand, the Dravath don't travel alone by choice. They're a communal species. Being the only one left is not something their psychology handles easily. The crew wanted to move on. The mission had a schedule. Rilo was not their problem. Davi Orel made him their problem. Sorn almost smiled when she said it. Not a happy smile, the kind that holds something too big for the moment. "He just wouldn't leave," she said. "I told him we had 3 days on site maximum." He nodded and then went back down into the ruins to sit near the dragon. Rilo hissed at him for 2 hours the first day. Davi just sat there with his back against the wall, eating his ration pack, not pushing, not talking much, just being there. The second day, Rilo stopped hissing. The third day, Davi brought him water in a bowl from the ship's kitchen, actual tableware, not a container, and set it close without getting closer himself. Rilo watched it for an hour, then he drank. Wren thought about what that must have looked like. A man sitting in old ruins next to a creature who had lost everything, not trying to fix it, just refusing to leave. Sorn explained the Dravath custom then, the Solanka. In their culture, an object given freely during a moment of real suffering carried the spirit of the giver inside it, not metaphorically. In their belief, literally, the object became a physical record of the choice that was made, the choice to stay, to give, to see. It was more sacred than almost anything else in their tradition. Davi didn't know any of that, Sorn said. He just knew the dragon was cold. The temperature in those lower ruins drops at night, and Rilo's wing was too damaged to keep heat in. So on the third evening, Davi took off his jacket and put it near him. She stopped. Not on him. Davi wasn't foolish enough to try that. He just put it within reach and went to sleep a few meters away. She paused again. When I came down in the morning to tell Davi we had to extend the mission timeline, because of course I extended it, Rilo was lying on the jacket, and he was watching Davi sleep with an expression I didn't have a word for. Wren thought of Rilo in the cargo bay, jaw resting on the faded letters near the collar, DRL. He gave it to him, Ren said. The jacket. He tried to give it back. Rilo wouldn't let him take it. Sorn picked up her maintenance pad again, not to work from it, something to hold. Davy thought it was funny. He said, "Fine, you keep it. It looks better on you anyway." He was laughing when he said it. The corridor was quiet for a moment. "What happened on Verath 6? Ren asked. Sorn looked at her. Something in her face said she had been carrying the answer to that question for a long time without being able to put it down. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "I'll tell you the rest." Sorn told it plainly. That was the thing Ren remembered most afterward, how plain it was. No extra words, no softening, just the shape of what happened, laid out like a map of a place that still existed even after the people who lived there were gone. The mission had been extended twice by the time they went back into the deep ruins. Rilo had recovered enough to move on his own. Though his wing was still wrapped in the field dressing, Davy had applied over 3 careful sessions that had each taken the better part of an hour. He knew the lower ruin layout from his original survey team's work, and what he knew would save them 3 days of mapping. So he led. It was not, Sorn said, an unusual arrangement by that point. Rilo walked at the front with Davy just behind him, and the rest of the 6-person crew followed. They had found a rhythm. Rilo would pause at a junction and look back. Davy would ask a question, sometimes out loud and sometimes just by raising an eyebrow. Rilo would tip his head in the direction they needed to go. The crew followed. They had collected 4 of the 7 target data cores when the tremor hit. Not a large one, that was the awful part of it, Sorn said. It was not a catastrophic event. It was a small geological shift, the kind that happened frequently in that area, and the ruins absorbed most of it. But the absorption was uneven. One section of the ceiling in the data corridor, a long, vaulted passage connecting 2 deeper chambers, shifted and cracked, and a section of that ceiling came down. Rilo saw it before anyone else. He turned and made a sound Ren had no human word for, a sharp, resonant bark that dropped into a low note on the end, and lunged, not toward the exit, but toward Davy. He hit Davy's left arm with his shoulder, pushing him sideways. The falling section of ceiling missed Davy. It did not miss Rilo. The edge of it caught him across the back of his already damaged wing and knocked him flat. The weight did not land full on him, it glanced, but it was enough to open the wound on his wing again and slam him hard against the floor. He lay there for a moment, not moving, while the corridor filled with dust. Davy was on his knees next to him before the dust settled. "He just went," Sorn said. "No hesitation. I was calling out to count heads, and he was already on the floor checking Rilo's wing." She paused. The wing wasn't the problem. It was the impact, internal. We didn't know how bad yet. They needed to get out. The tremor had destabilized the corridor significantly. Sorn could see new cracks spreading in the vault above them in the light of their work lamps, moving in the slow, deliberate way of something that has decided to fall, but has not chosen when yet. 2 crew members took the recovered cores. 2 helped move Rilo, who was conscious but unsteady and clearly in pain. Sorn took the rear to watch the ceiling. Davy carried nothing. He stayed next to Rilo the whole way, one hand resting lightly on the dragon's side, talking, not loudly, just a low, steady sound, the kind you use with something that is frightened and in pain to give it something to follow through the dark. They were near the exit tunnel when the secondary crack gave. The sound was enormous. The corridor section behind them collapsed fully, sending a pressure wave of dust and air through the tunnel. Davy stumbled. The exit beam, a load-bearing stone arch at the tunnel entrance, cracked across the middle and began to separate. If it fell, they were sealed in. Rilo saw it. He stepped out of the hands supporting him. He planted his feet in the rubble, and he breathed fire at the crack in the arch. Not a burst, not a desperate blast. A precise, controlled stream held exactly on the fracture line, heating the stone until the expansion pressure equalized the split and sealed it. His tail was shaking. His injured wing was bleeding again. He held the fire for 11 seconds. Sorn counted later from her suit recorder. Then he stopped, staggered, and Davy caught him. They got out. Davy did not make it back to the ship in the same condition. The pressure wave had done something internal that was not visible and not immediately painful, which was the worst kind. He collapsed in the transport and did not regain full consciousness. Sorn did not say the next part in detail. She said only that the medical bay was not enough, and that they had been 12 hours from the nearest station, and that Davy had understood this by the time he woke briefly near the end. What he did with that brief waking was reach out and rest his hand on Rilo's head. The dragon had not left the medical bay. He was sitting on the floor beside the bed in a space too small for him, wings folded, absolutely still. Davy did not say anything. Rilo made a sound very quietly that Sorn had never heard before and had never heard since. When it was over, Rilo picked up the jacket from the chair where Davy had left it before the mission. He carried it off the ship himself. Nobody tried to take it. The ship that docked on the 14th day was not on Caloran's scheduled manifest. It was a Verath vessel, narrow, dark-hulled, built for long distances rather than comfort. It docked without incident and requested only a brief berth and a meeting with Director Falk. Falk, who had been quietly trying to arrange a longer-term solution to the Rilo situation for weeks, agreed immediately. The Verath who came off the ship was called Nos. He was large for his kind, twice Rilo's size, with deep bronze scales and a bearing that filled rooms without trying. His wings were broad and showed old scarring on the trailing edges, the kind that came from decades of use, not accidents. He walked through Caloran's corridors with the careful attention of someone reading a place while crossing it. Falk met him in the administrative suite and offered what information he had. Rilo had been on the station for 3 months. He was not aggressive and caused no operational problems. He ate what was left at the end of cargo crew meals, which was apparently sufficient. He did not speak to many people. He had a jacket. Nos listened to all of this with a patience that was not comfortable. "I am his elder," Nos said. "I have come to bring him home." Falk said he was relieved to hear it. Ren heard about the arrival from Fen. She went to the cargo bay and found Nos already there, standing a few meters from Rilo's corner, looking at the smaller dragon with an expression she could not fully read. Rilo had not moved. The jacket was spread beneath him. He was watching Nos the way he had watched everything on this station, with attention and with distance. They spoke in their own language first. Ren did not understand the words, but tone crossed between species well enough, and she could hear that it was careful and old and not easy on either end. Then Nos switched to the common tongue, perhaps because he had noticed Ren, perhaps because he wanted the words to be witnessed. "You carry it still," Nos said. "Yes," Rilo said. It was the first word Ren had heard him speak. His voice was low and even. "It has been long enough. The release ritual should have been done months ago." Rilo said nothing. Nos continued. In Verath tradition, when a Solanka object's giver died, the object was to be burned in a formal ceremony, not out of disrespect, out of the opposite. The burning was a release, a way of freeing the spirit that had been given into the object, so it could move forward rather than remaining caught in the physical world. Holding the object past the mourning period was considered a way of keeping the dead person trapped. It was not grief in their tradition. It was something closer to a mistake made out of love. "You are hurting him," Nos said quietly. "Whatever you believe you are preserving, you are holding him in place." Rilo's eyes moved to the jacket, then back to Nos. "No," he said. One word, flat, not angry, final in the way a stone wall is final. Nos was not moved, but something shifted in his posture. He had expected resistance, Ren thought. He had not perhaps expected that particular quality of it, not the no of stubbornness, but the no of someone who has thought about something for a very long time. "You were found alone," Nos said. "You were the last of your survey party. You know what that costs. Carrying a wound like this does not heal it." "I know what it costs," Rilo said. "Then come home. The community will help you through the ritual. You do not need to do this here, in a human freight station, surrounded by strangers." "They are not strangers," Rilo said. and then he went quiet again, jaw lowering to rest on the worn canvas near the collar. Nos stood there for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back toward the administrative corridor without another word. Ren stayed where she was until she was sure he was gone. Rilo was looking at the jacket. "He's going to come back," she said. "Yes," Rilo agreed. "Do you want me to?" She stopped. She did not know how to finish that sentence. Do what? Stand here? Leave? Find some human solution to something that was not a human problem? Rilo looked at her. Something in the amber of his eyes was steady in the way that things are steady when they have decided. "He will give me 3 days," Rilo said. "He is traditional. 3 is the ritual number. And at the end of 3 days." Rilo looked back at the jacket. He didn't answer. Ren left him alone and went to find Captain Sorn. She did not fully know why. It felt like the right thing to do, which was sometimes the only compass available. Sorn listened to everything, then she was quiet for a while. "He's not wrong," she said finally. "Nos, in their tradition, he's not wrong." "But," Ren said. Sorn looked out at the docking arm where her ship sat. But Davi wasn't part of their tradition, and what happened between them, that's not something their ritual was written for. She didn't say anything else, but her face held the look of someone forming a plan without knowing it yet. Ren did not sleep much that night. She lay in her bunk and thought about the 3-day clock, about Nos and his tradition, about a jacket worn colorless at the shoulders, about a man she had never met who had sat in old ruins eating a ration pack next to a creature that hated him until the creature stopped hatting him. She thought about how small that was, how quiet, how nobody would have written it into any record as a moment of significance. By the 4th hour, she gave up on sleeping and went to the station archive terminal. Davi Orel's file was not large. Survey xenobiologist, 12 years of field service, 3 commendations for work in hostile environment contact situations, a list of published research notes on non-standard biological communication. A personnel photo from 4 years ago. He was looking slightly to the left of the camera, like something had caught his attention a moment before the shutter closed. He had a kind face, not a remarkable one. The kind of face that would be easy to overlook in a crowd and impossible to forget once you knew him. She found mission logs, not the classified operational data, but the daily field journals that crew members filed for the survey archive. Davi's entries were short. He did not write the way people write when they think someone is reading. He wrote the way people write when they are trying to think clearly. Day 1 on Verath 6 found something alive in the lower ruin. Wing damaged, will not approach, leaving water. Day 2, it hissed at me for 2 hours and then stopped. Progress. Day 3, brought the good bowl from the ship kitchen. Don't tell Fen, I took it off the manifest. Day 7, he sat close enough this morning that I could have touched him if I'd reached out. I didn't. I think that was the right call. There is something very careful about the way he decides to trust, like he knows the cost and is weighing it every time. Ren read that line again. She read it a 3rd time. Then she copied the full set of logs onto a data chip, added the personnel photo, and added the one voice recording in the archive, a training file from a xenobiology workshop, 40 seconds of Davi explaining the difference between distress vocalizations and warning calls in avian species, recorded 3 years before Verath 6. He was laughing at something someone off mic had said right before the recording started. The laugh was still in his voice when he began speaking. It stayed there the whole 40 seconds. She went to Cargo Bay 3 at first light. Rilo was awake. He watched her come in. She crouched at her usual distance, set the data chip on the floor between them, and slid it a short way toward him with one finger. "That's his field journals," she said, "and a recording of his voice. I don't know if you want it. I thought you should have the choice." She stood up and left. She did not see what he did with it. She told herself that was not the point. Word moved through Caloran in the way that things move through small, enclosed communities, not through announcement, but through a kind of ambient understanding that passed from person to person without anyone quite being able to say how it got there. By midday, Most of the freight crew knew about the Elder, the 3-day window, and the jacket. Nobody organized a response. That was the thing Wren noticed later, turning it over in her mind. There was no meeting, no plan, no human being stood up and said, "Here is what we are going to do." Things just happened. Fen, the dockmaster who had worked Caloran for 11 years and was not easily moved by anything, walked through Cargo Bay 3 in the late afternoon. He was not going anywhere that required passing through Cargo Bay 3. He set a piece of roasted grain bread, the kind the kitchen made on slow days, thick and warm, on the floor near Rilo's corner, and kept walking without looking back or saying a word. Two of the freight crew, who had complained the most about the Dragon taking up space in Bay 3, found a reason to run diagnostics on the containers nearest his corner, which took them close to 2 hours and required them to move with quiet consideration for the sleeping creature nearby. Someone turned down the lights in that section of the bay. Nobody admitted to it. Captain Sorn came in the evening. She did not crouch. She did not try to close the distance. She simply sat on a cargo container at the edge of the bay's open space where Rilo could see her clearly and stayed there. An hour, maybe more. At some point she said quietly without looking directly at him, "He talked about you constantly after Verath 6. Every crew meal, every briefing. He was proud of you in a way he didn't have words for. I thought you should know." Rilo did not respond, but his head lifted slightly just for a moment. Director Falk spent most of the day in his office. He was not, by his own description, a sentimental man. He had spent 15 years managing outposts at the edges of surveyed space and had learned to govern by numbers and schedules rather than feelings. Feelings, in his experience, complicated logistics. He filed the accommodation extension at 1900 hours. Formal request to the Dravath Trade Council, citing Rilo's status as a survivor of a near-extinction level event and the station's ongoing obligations under the Outer Worlds Sanctuary Accord. He cited 3 relevant clauses and attached 2 supporting documents. It was thorough, professional, completely airtight. He did not tell anyone he had done it. Rilo, by the time the second day ended, had stopped turning away when someone came near. He had not spoken, he had not reached out, but the data chip was no longer on the floor where Wren had left it. It was tucked beneath the jacket, near the collar, near the name. On the third morning, Rilo went to find Nos. Not the other way around. That was the detail that stayed with Wren afterward. She had half expected Nos to arrive in the cargo bay at dawn with ceremony and tradition and the quiet pressure of an elder who had run out of patience. Instead, Rilo walked out of Bay 3 on his own, jacket folded and carried in his forearms the way you carry something you are not putting down, and crossed the station to the berth where the Dravath ship was docked. Wren followed at a distance because she needed to see it even if she had no right to be there. Sorn came too, a few steps behind her, for the same reason. Nos was outside his ship, waiting, but not in the way of someone who expected to win, in the way of someone who had prepared for difficulty. Rilo stopped in front of him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rilo said, "When the extinction came, when our people were almost gone and the survivors were scattered across systems without enough ships or enough food or enough of anything, what kept them moving?" Nos looked at him. It was not the question he had expected. "The knowledge that we had existed," Nos said slowly, "that we were real, that there had been something worth surviving for." "Yes," Rilo said, "proof. They needed proof that they had been real to the world. That is why we carry our history, why we keep the records, the rituals, He was the first proof I ever had," Rilo said, "that I was real to someone outside myself." Nos went quiet. Rilo's voice did not rise. It did not waver. It had the quality of something that had been turned over in silence for a long time until all the unnecessary parts were gone and only the center remained. "I was the last one. You know what that is. I sat in those ruins for 11 days with everyone gone, and I understood very clearly that I could disappear and the universe would not notice. That is not grief. That is a specific kind of knowledge. It changes how you hold yourself." He looked down at the jacket in his arms. He sat near me and did not try to fix me and did not leave. He gave me water in a real bowl. He gave me his jacket because I was cold and he did not want me to be cold. These are small things. I know they are small things. He paused. But I had never been a small thing to anyone before. I had been a survey asset, a survivor, a last specimen of a diminishing species. He looked at me and saw something that was cold and that he could warm, and he did it because that is who he was. He looked up at Nos. The jacket is not proof that he is still here. I am not confused about what death is. The jacket is proof that it happened, that someone chose me, that I was worth choosing. His voice was very even. I am not holding him in place. I am holding the evidence that I existed to him, and I am not finished learning what that means. Nos stood very still. He was a large creature, older than most of the things on this station, shaped by a history of loss that most species had no equivalent for. He had watched his civilization nearly end. He had spent decades helping the survivors rebuild a culture worth living in. He understood grief in its bones. He had written traditions for it. And he had not written a tradition for this. For a small dragon who had been invisible to the universe until a human xenobiologist sat in a ruin eating a ration pack and decided that was not acceptable. After a long time, Nos lowered his head. Then he placed one large, clawed foot over Rilo's briefly with a gentleness that was old and careful. It was a Dravath gesture that had no direct translation. It meant something close to, "I see you, and I was wrong about what I was seeing." He did not ask for the jacket. He went back onto his ship. The Dravath vessel undocked 2 hours later without ceremony, and Caloran's manifest resumed its ordinary rhythm. Ren found Rilo in the late afternoon at the station's observation deck, a small, seldom-used room with a long viewport and a bench that was slightly too short for anyone to sleep on. He was sitting on the floor beneath the viewport, jacket spread across his forelegs, looking out at the dark. She sat on the floor near him, not at her usual distance, closer. He did not move away. After a while, she reached out slowly and touched the cuff of the jacket, just the fraying edge, just for a moment. She felt the worn canvas under her fingers, thin with use, soft in the way that fabric gets when it has been held for a long time. Rilo watched her hand. His expression was not what she expected. It was not grief, exactly. It was something quieter than grief, something that lived on the other side of it, the place you reach after you have carried something so long that it stops being a weight and starts being a part of how you stand. He let her hand rest there. Outside the viewport, stars in every direction, the station's ambient hum, somewhere in the docking arms, the sound of a ship preparing to leave. He had carried it because he needed proof that he had been worth caring about. He had found that proof, and he was still finding it, and he did not intend to stop. The jacket lay across his forelegs in the starlight, and it was enough.